You can see God in anything your reflections in. I can find God in anything I'm reflected in. You can see God in anything your reflections in. I can find God in anything I'm reflected in. You can see God in anything your reflections in. I can find God in anything I'm reflected in. You can see God in anything your reflections in. I can find God in anything. Some people open up their eyes to see the world they know outside. I can close my eyes and see all that and way beyond. When these trials of life come heavy and these obstacles get hard, feeling like I need some answers, I just go and talk to God. I just go and talk to God when I'm looking for guidance. Need more than sight, need vision, need direction when I'm blinded. Then I start that conversation with that voice I hear inside me. And that conversation starts with a voice inside that sounds just like me. When I talk to God, you can see God in anything, your reflection. I can find God in anything. When I talk to God, you can see God in anything. When I talk to God, find God in anything. When I talk to God, my daddy said don't never assume, ask questions. It's ironic, it was that advice that helped the song happen. It was also that advice that led me to my life's blessings. That same advice helped me make it through life's lessons. It was that advice that separates grown-ups away from children. That advice can be the difference from knowing or just believing. It was that advice that brought the gavel down on my decisions of breaking the mental chains of these man-created religions. Cause faith and belief, nonsense, the biggest scam ever. I hate to say it, I swear it's one hell of a mental illness. Why we do it with these religions? The fact that COVID's killing while all of these guys is missing. Peekaboos, guys playing games with you. I'ma just assume he ain't got no COVID miracles. Maybe he ran out after making the donkey talk. Or some stories about a guy walking on water tides. Simply a distraction to keep you away from you and to look outside for a God when the God is inside of you. When you close your eyes at night and pray to that voice you talking to. When you ready to face the truth, you realize that voice is you. You can see God in anything your reflections in. I can find God in anything I'm reflecting in. You can see God in anything your reflections in. I can find God in anything I'm reflecting in. You can see God in anything your reflections in. I can find God in anything I'm reflecting in. You can see God in anything your reflections in. I can find God in anything I'm reflecting in.
Hey, what up, family? How y'all doing? Peace. Peace, Joe. What's up? Let's get it. Peace, Joanne. What's going on, y'all? All right, all right. As we always do, the preliminary stuff. Y'all go ahead, share it out, do what we gotta do. And if you're not on the YouTube, get on the YouTube and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Been getting some things together so I can do some pre-recorded videos for a segment I'm going to call The Voice of Eli. Some of y'all see those videos when you go over there. But to catch what we're doing here on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, you got to click lives. These are all considered lives on YouTube. So you got to go in there. But don't worry, I'm going to organize the Voice of Eli section. And y'all see what that's all about once I can get maybe 2 or 3 videos in. And we'll promote that a little bit more. Hope y'all had a good day on today. Per usual, things were a little hectic at the job, but we are here. Hey, what's up, Texas Goddess? Good to see you. So what we're going to do is we're going to treat this kind of like how we were treating it the other night. And I'm going to go through some texts. And tonight, I definitely want to get into the New Testament with that book of Philemon. Because I got a question I want to ask about that. And let me start off with my general question to the believers out there, to my believing friends. I want to ask you, is slavery morally reprehensible? Is slavery immoral? Okay, is it okay or is it not okay to own another human being? This is my question to the Christians. Now, maybe, or I have invited some to the show. I don't know the schedules. I don't know if they'll make it, but hopefully they will come on in here and get with us. So while we are talking, I'm trying to make sure there's nothing else. Yeah, we need to continue to let you all know we have scheduled Willie Cartwright to be with us on this coming Monday. go ahead. I'll try to get the link out for the event as soon as possible, and so that y'all can start sharing that out. But it will be on Monday. It will be at our regular time, and he is the author of the book From Saved to Sane. Looking very much forward to talking with him. As y'all know, we are keeping with some of the themes that relate to African American people here in this country. Don't crucify me for using the phrase African American. Some people like it, some people don't. I'm using it because y'all generally know who I'm talking about, and this is the month of February. So since y'all minds are conscious on it, I figure we'll talk about some of the stuff that kind of comes up when we talk about melanated people and their history in this country. Slavery is one of them, and a lot of believers would like to call that slavery something else other than what it really is. And this is the dark side of the Bible that believers don't seem to want to talk about, but is there. And I think it's important that we talk about it if your God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, as it says in the Bible. Now, y'all bear with me. I want to let's see, get in. I think I want to go back to Exodus 21 and kind of kick it off there. This is the one where it gets into a lot of physical things, what you can do to the Hebrew slave, and recognize there's a distinction. There are Hebrew slaves, then there are non-Hebrew slaves. The Hebrew slaves were, of course, that they were Hebrew by blood, and they had a different set of rules for them versus the non-Hebrew slaves. A lot of it was similar, but it was not the same. When you total everything up, the Hebrew slave had it better and would definitely be set free in this thing called the year of Jubilee. We talked about that on last time. We got one. What Richie seems to be coming in from the back. So we're going to let Richie get on, and I will bring up some of the information while he is here. Let me see if I can add him to the stream. I don't like that background. What's up, Richie?
What's going on, General?
Yeah, man, I'm all right. I'm going to go ahead and change that back to black. Oh, where did that come from? Let's do it like this. I guess that's all right. I'm doing some things trying to upgrade it a little bit. How you doing, Richie? You said you wanted to make sure you got into my position on slavery, and I think this would make for a good conversation for us. Since I have you here, I do have a few things I want to read, and but I think we can address that as we go. You had a good day, man?
Oh yeah, still here, breathing, giving thanks.
What I was telling the people is that there's a difference. There definitely was slavery in the Bible, but there's a difference between the Hebrew slave, okay, and the non-Hebrew slave. But before we go into that, I got a question for you, Richie, as a believer. If you did catch the replays, then you probably know my question. My question to you, and you can answer however you want. You got all the time you need. Is slavery morally reprehensible?
Yeah, so when we hear the word slavery, our mind goes back to the slavery that our ancestors were into. So if I was to answer that question in that context, absolutely. Morally, it's no excuse for it. It's cowardice. It's just wrong.
Has it always been that way? I mean, because I'm asking this for a reason. I'm obviously getting to something. Has it always been wrong? Is it every situation is slavery morally reprehensible? Any exceptions to the rule?
Yeah, the slavery in our context, it's always never acceptable. Never.
Okay. So in the Bible, slavery, is it a problem? I guess what I'm asking you is, if slavery is wrong, then why do we see the regulation of it in the Bible?
So, like, when you say slavery, are we just talking about the slavery we've been through, or just in general owning any man in general in that context?
I'm talking about owning another human being, and
Mhm.
all I've been talking about is slavery in the Bible. I have not made any reference. I don't recall in this week of anything outside of the Bible and the Bible context. My
Mhm.
position is that even that slavery is morally
Okay.
reprehensible.
Yeah. So owning another man, I would say, unwillingly, yes, it's morally wrong. Now, if
Okay.
a person willingly puts himself in slavery, that's up to the person that did that. You understand what I'm saying? Like, if you were to put yourself into slavery, then the question changes because now you're the one that put yourself into that slavery willingly. You didn't basically, you weren't forced into it. So the question is, I'll ask is, why did you do that? That'll be my question.
That would be my question would be, why are God's people accepting that? Even a
Mhm.
person, if I come to one of them and say, hey, I'm down on my luck or whatever, I'll be your slave. Why is that acceptable to a people that's supposed to be the people of the Most High God?
Mhm.
And then the other thing is, if slavery is morally reprehensible, and I think it is, period, why didn't the God of the Bible simply just say, nah, we're not doing that?
Mhm.
We don't see that. We see a regulation of things. And in Exodus 21 was where I launched from, because it talks about something. And then verse 21, it gets really bad, in my opinion, where the Hebrew is allowed to not only own the slave, but they are allowed to inflict corporal punishment on these people, these so-called slaves, and they have a limit to the corporal punishment, but that is still, to me, morally reprehensible. Even if there's a limit, there is, first of all, the slavery shouldn't be a thing. But even if it is a thing, now you have a regulation on how bad you can beat this other human being. I
Mhm.
mean, deny any of that, or do, because we need to probably go and read it again.
Yeah. So I looked at you, went to your first show that you did because I wanted to get the first show. I was listening in and out when it was live, so I went back today to get all the points you were saying. So what I did was that I kind of wrote down all the regulations from the Old
Mhm.
Testament.
Right.
So Exodus 21 verses 1 through 11. Basically, we have there's 6 years of service, and
Let
the
me go
seventh
ahead
you
and
go
pull that
free.
up. Let me
Yeah,
let me pull that up, and
yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
people can know where we are. Let me share that. Exodus 20. And by the way, I pulled the NIV because I'm in the Old Testament. It's just widely used. I do know a lot of us grew up with the KJV,
Hmm.
but I'm just my opinion. It might be a little easier for those who are unfamiliar with these texts to understand it as written or translated in the NIV.
Hmm. Yeah,
Okay,
so
I'm there.
what I did was I just wrote down the points. So like, if you think I missed something, we could, you could point it out. So basically,
Okay.
the one point was that there was 6 years of service, and the seventh year you go free, not empty-handed. If you were married before, the wife does not belong to the master. But if you
Let's
got,
clarify. I'm respectfully interrupting you.
yeah, yeah,
That is for what you're talking about. That's for the Hebrew slave, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
Hebrew slave.
Hebrew
Yep.
slave. Okay.
If the master gives him a wife, like while you're a slave, and if you get a wife while you were in slavery from the master, the wife and the children belongs to the master. The servant is allowed to commit himself to the master for life. If a man sells his daughter to servitude, she shall not do men's work. If a master does not want her, he cannot sell her to another nation. She is free. If a master marries her to his son, she has to be treated like a full daughter in law. If not, she's set free. Then Deuteronomy 15, 12, verses 12 to 8, it basically gives provisions to servant after freedom. Like basically, yeah, you can't leave empty-handed. Once you're set free, you have to your master has to make sure you're well taken care of.
The
And
Hebrew
then
slave,
Hebrew slave,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
And then point 8, men were allowed to marry women from captives of war. All right. Point 9. You cannot return a runaway slave to the master. He has to dwell safely among you. Point number 10. Uh, Thieves are sold into slavery if they cannot restore the theft. So if I stole something and I can't repay it, then I'm sold into slavery. Point number 11. This is from Leviticus 25:39-55. Poor people cannot become slaves. You can only become a hired servant, meaning that you have to, you're not owned by the person, but you could basically be employed by them for 7 years. Servants from other nations you could buy, and they could serve you permanently. So I mean, that's the point she was making, that only Hebrew slaves get these benefits. Point number 13: killing a slave requires punishment. Point number 14: injuring a slave makes the slave free. So those are kind of all the points I pulled out from all the verses that the Old Testament. It's all only Old Testament I'm dealing with right now. So you think I missed anything, or you think that pretty much covers everything?
I actually wish I had the time to go through and do my own points like that. But no. I think that's good. That's more than enough. And since you're here, it does make it easier for me to think about what I've studied, and then maybe we'll go back and forth on some of the points, So yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to kind of create a scenario now. I want to create a scenario where me and you were Hebrews. We're Hebrew people. We're faithful to the law of Moses, right?
Okay.
Because these are laws, so your laws got to be applied to realistic situations. So let's go back in time to the time of the Dahomey Kingdom, where they were basically capturing slaves and selling them to Europeans. Other West African nations were doing that too as well, right? So I mean, one day we were traveling to Africa, and we heard there's a trade going on and stuff. So we like, let's go over there, see what's going on, and we find out they're selling slaves, right?
Okay.
Does the Bible allow us to purchase those slaves?
From what I read, you can purchase slaves that you can purchase the slaves from the nations around you.
Yeah. So there's a point I didn't include in my list. Point number 15. Stealing a man to sell or for possession, you shall be put to death. And that's in Exodus 21, verse 16. Since you're already here, Exodus, I know you go down to verse 16.
Right. Mm-hmm. Let me let's say. Okay, 16. Okay. Yeah. Anyone who kidnaps, I'm reading it in NIV. Mm-hmm. Anyone who kidnaps someone to be put to, is to be put to death, whether the victim has been sold or is still in the kidnapper's possession.
Right. So we know that when it comes to the law, there's a verse in Isaiah 28:10 that says, line upon line, precept upon precept. So it's like when you're having a law, you cannot have a law that contradicts another law. When you're using when you're judging law, you have all the laws have to come in perfect harmony with one another. So based on all of these principles that we said, we could not purchase the slave trade. We could not participate in the African slave trade because those people were kidnapped and stolen. So we could not participate. So the question is, so what kind of slavery is the Old Testament talking about then? And the answer to that is voluntary slavery. The only slavery that it's talking about in the Old Testament law are people who voluntarily put themselves in slavery to pay off a debt.
Are you sure that's the only?
I mean, if you could find another reason why a person put into slavery, from what I read from the Old Testament.
How about being taken captive when the Israelites went in and were basically trying to, kill everybody? But what about those situations? Because that they were definitely taking slaves of those people. So what I have here, I'm going to read something to you from the Smith's Bible Dictionary. Matter of fact, I think I put it in my notes. I'm going to bring it up so people can see the picture I had of it. because I had to take screenshots. I wanted to do this a different way, but I'm gonna do it like this. So I'm gonna read it so people can see. I actually have it here. Okay, give me a second. All right, y'all should be able to see my notes. All right, and okay, I'll read it. The majority of non-Hebrew slaves were war captives, either of the Canaanites who had survived the general extermination of their race under Joshua, or such as were conquered from the other surrounding nations. Here is your text for that. We can go there, but I'm going to just go ahead and read it. Besides these, many were obtained by purchase from foreign slave dealers. I don't know how they verified whether or not these people were stolen. How would the Israelite who is buying this person, are they just taking the word of the slave trader? Oh, yeah, these people are in debt. These people are looking to be sold to somebody in order to pay off a debt, but really doesn't seem to make sense because you're dealing with a foreign slave trader. Now, I understand what you're saying. If you know that person has been kidnapped, okay, then maybe you commit it. But
according
how
to the
would
law,
they? How?
no.
Yeah. But how would they know? We talking about slave traders of other nations trying to make a dollar. But let me keep reading. Oh man, it's so small. Okay, many were obtained by purchase of foreign slave dealers, and there's another reference in the Bible saying that this is one of the things the Israelites were engaged in doing, and others may have been resident foreigners who were reduced to this state by either poverty or crime. Now, and here's the thing about those type of slaves, Richie, what he's going to say next. And this is Smith's Bible Dictionary. The children of slaves remain slaves, being the class described as born in the house. So we see that phrase back there in Genesis. But the thing is, let's say the Hebrews went in, conquered a city, took some slaves. Those slaves and the children they would have, they didn't have the same benefits that were pointed out by you and some others as the Hebrew slaves. They were done. They were slaves. That was it. And you could will those slaves to your children. So let me build another scenario. Let's say I'll put myself on the low end. Let's say you're a Hebrew guy, you need some work done, and let's say I'm a slave over here. Maybe I've been stolen or kidnapped, maybe I haven't. But you know, somebody is a slave trader, and you come by saying, "Man, I need some help." How much is that guy? And we should get into that, y'all. By the way, let me go ahead and say it because I have a tendency to forget with all this stuff going on. The purchase of a slave. Anybody want to take a guess? I'll see if they want to put that in the chat. I'll just say it that way. Anybody want to take a guess on how much the slave was purchased for? Now, going back to my scenario, you buy me, Richie. You buy me, and you already said it. Even for the Hebrew, let's say you give me a wife. If I have kids, they're yours, man. You get all of that. Even if I come to a situation, they say, man, I got this whole family that I'm selling. Okay. Those kids and the kids we have, they don't have the same rights as that Hebrew slave that came to you, sold himself to you as a rich Hebrew. He sold himself to you. I don't have that same right because I'm not a Hebrew. I'm done for. I mean, have I said anything against what it means?
Yeah, if you stay a foreigner, yeah, definitely, you're gonna be a eternal slave. But the thing is, to your point, number one, I couldn't buy you if I know. If I'm following the law, I gotta follow precept upon precept, line upon line. If I knew you were kidnapped, I couldn't buy you. That's number one. Number two, Deuteronomy 24, 14 to 15. You cannot oppress the poor, whether Hebrew or foreigner, right? So basically, if you were poor, I cannot enslave you. So I'm going by the law. You got to follow every law. You can't just take one law and, say, all right, I'm going to just follow this law right here, line upon line, precept upon precept. Exodus 22, 21, Leviticus 19, Deuteronomy 24, cannot mistreat or oppress a foreigner. Deuteronomy 10:19 said you gotta love the foreigners. And here's the most important one: equality for foreigners and Israel, and that's in Numbers 9. I have a whole bunch of scriptures that talk about that, but there's like 5, 6, 7 scriptures that talk about equality for foreigners and Israel. Now, here's the most
Can
important
I
thing.
ask
Now,
you about that equality? And I want us to do this. I want us to do that healthy interjection here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you talked about how the Hebrews had their way. Now you're talking about equality.
Yeah.
However, we have already seen that, and admittedly, that the laws are not the same for the Hebrew slaves as they are for the foreigner slaves. How is that equal?
Exactly. I mean, that's just the principle of life. Same thing with this country. If a foreigner comes to this country, they cannot collect Social Security. They cannot get certain benefits we could get, right? But if they become a citizen now, they get all the benefits, and that's the point of the foreigner now. If the foreigner becomes a Israelite, he now gets the benefit of the Hebrew slave, the Hebrew servant. So now put it this way: now you buy me from this nation, right? And you're a Hebrew, and I'm a Canaanite. And you bought me because I put myself into slavery because I had to pay off a debt, and my master sold me to you. So now when you buy me as a foreigner, your law tells you that you cannot let me go. But if you're a righteous person, you show me all the benefits of a Hebrew, I can say to you, like, I want to be a Hebrew. So what does that mean I got to do? I got to denounce my God. I got to stop eating pork, stop eating shellfish, like you mentioned. I got to follow your festivals. I got to become a Hebrew now. And Isaiah 56, verse 6 through 7 says, foreigners were allowed to become Israelites, therefore getting all their benefits. So there was still a way out, even for the foreigner, in God's law. Now, I remember this. I be speaking all this right now. All of this was not the morality for the whole world. This was only the law for the Israelites. And a lot of people don't realize how this law was written. It's the reason why it was called the law of Moses. It wasn't that God and Moses were talking one day, said, let's come up with a bunch of laws. These issues will come up, and then they will come to Moses, and they have to basically, come up with a scenario to solve this issue. Like, for instance, Roe versus Wade. That was a scenario that happened, and then from that historical event, it became law until it didn't become law last year. So in the instance for like when you beat a Hebrew slave now, right? I want to talk about that one right there. It does not tell you to beat a Hebrew slave. What it's saying is that those 2 days were provided to really give an assessment to see whether this incident happened, if that person suffered any injuries. There had to be like a 2-day assessment in a sense. But like, if you get in a car accident and you get whiplash, you won't feel that pain till after maybe a day or two later. So that 2 days was provided to that. Okay, this is what happened. Maybe what happened was man beat this slave. The slave complained to the government, like, look, I just got beaten. So there was like, look, since you lawfully put yourself into slavery voluntarily to pay off a debt, you know what I'm saying? They came up with a way to say, look, let's assess this for 2 days. If the person is not injured, you didn't break no bones, you didn't pluck out no eye, pluck out no teeth, you know what I'm saying? Then you're free to go if you're injured. So that's what that law was for, to basically
hold on. Let me ask. And this is with clarity say, what I heard you say is if the person is not injured.
Yeah.
And then because I know where you're going, it's in Exodus 21 for those of y'all who follow along. In the latter verses, it's gonna say the slave gets to go free if the beating they lose an eye, or they lose teeth or two. Now that doesn't mean that person's not injured, because it does say in 21 if they recover. So the beating has already taken place. You could have some other injury. As long as it's not the eye or teeth, then you're good. But what about if that person, got a broken nose? Richie, you there? I hope it's looks like we may have froze on us. Well, but I hope y'all can hear me. If y'all can hear me, and we go do good on your technology, put a 1 in the chat so I can know what's up. I think Richie cut out on us, but Richie, if you're hearing what I'm saying, when you say not injured, that I think is a little bit off from what we're talking about, because this person is clearly injured. It says if they are able to carry on. Let me just go to it. And Richie, come back when you're able to get whatever's going on with the internet under control. Let me share this and show y'all what I'm talking about. We're in Exodus 21. Hold on. Okay. Exodus 21. Okay. It says, make sure I'm sharing it right. Boom. Exodus 21. Anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result. Okay, that's death. Okay, they die, so now okay, you beat them to death, and that's better than what was going on in the American slave trade or whatever, the transatlantic slave trade. That's not even what I'm talking about. I never appealed to that. I'm just talking about slavery right there in the Bible. But verse 21 of Exodus 21, it says, but if they are not, I'm sorry, but they are not to be punished if the slave recovers. Well, what do you don't need to recover if you're not injured, right? You don't need to recover. But if you're injured, you need to recover. It says to not be they're not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or two, since the slave is their property. For me, 21:21, let me tell y'all what that means. Because you own that person is property to you. Just like I don't know, this cup, if y'all seeing it. I think he said he'll be back. His Wi-Fi was messing up on him, but he'll be back. This cup, this is my cup. This is my cup. This is my property. Okay. If I want to chuck this thing out right now, I can. If I want to, I don't know, whatever. If I just want to throw the cup across the room, I can still use the cup. It's not going to break. It's a plastic cup. It's not going to break. It's my property though, so who cares? I can do what I want to do. And this is what the language is that I'm reading in Exodus 21, but we're dealing with a human being. We are not dealing with an inanimate object. Why are we saying that this is okay and that this makes sense? Now, I have said that I'm putting this in the context. I know we think about slavery when we think about what happened to African Americans here in this country and what happened to the original people here in it. That's what we think about. But I'm meaning that because we're conscious of what and what it amounts to. I go outside of the Bible to find the reprehend and right here is a principle at contractual ownership relationship. Quentin, BS. Okay, so it's not just a contractual relation. I actually gave you let me go back to that screen. Called by the Israelites, have no buddy, no contract. That was it for you. Let me Richie, I see you. Hold on 1 second. I wanted to go back to my screen. You know what? I'll just do it this way. Give me a second, Richie. Going back to my screen, and I'm gonna add you in. Richie, I'm gonna add you in, but I wanted to address something that Quentin is saying here. Give me a second to get to my screen because he's talking about what I don't like is that sometimes believers like to make it a blanket. Slavery was a contractual agreement between them, and you know what? We can get to the contractual. That's just not true. It was not always a contractual agreement. Let's see, where was I? Is it born in the house? Where was it? Let me hear. The children of slaves, the class that born in the house. Those slaves that came from children and their children, they didn't have a chance. Why is that not morally reprehensible to the believer? And let's stop acting like this isn't there. It is there. So can we, let's talk about it. And I'm not talking to you directly, Richie. I'm just saying in general. The average value of a slave appears to have been, for those, I don't know if y'all put in the chat yet, 30 shekels. Interesting. Silver, because the shekel here, more like it had to do with silver or is a measurement of weight, and they usually did that in silver. That the slave might be meant, I can't say that right now, but this is basically be redeemed or buy themselves out of it. The slave is described as the possession of his master, apparently with a special reference to the power which the latter had of disposing of him to his heirs as he would any other article of personal property. So just like I was saying with my cup, you can do as you would. Now, what I did bring out, I'm gonna stop sharing that, but what I did bring out, I think on the last show, Richie, is that, and this is a subtle nuance that I will admit this might be a bit subjective. I'm not main argument, but it seemed to me slaves were used to increase their master's worth and everything. They work for them. We saw that even here with the transatlantic slave trade. We still have companies among us right now that benefit from the free labor. So when I go back to the Old Testament and I'm reading about this stuff, yeah, they had slaves. Slaves were there to help them work. But if you killed one, then you didn't have a hand. You didn't have somebody that could work, and now you got to either go buy another one, or the work was going to be that much more on everybody else because somebody's got to make up for the dead slave's work or whatever. Or he can't see as good anymore. That's why he gets to go free. And I could be wrong, but I don't think anybody was going to buy the guy that didn't have an eye or whatever. But anyway, all slavery was not a contractual agreement in the Bible. And that same slavery that was not contractual, that slavery that was, when I think about it hard enough, Richie, I know you're going on a point about them not supposed to, they're not supposed to buy people who are kidnapped, but I'm getting, man, I have a problem with this
bad
war
part of
thing.
that too. You gotta the bad part about that, you gotta trust that the Hebrews are following the law word for word, because they could ignore that part of the law and not care how this person was purchased. And this is the beef that God had with the Israelites, and which is why also Nehemiah he outlawed all kind of slavery, even the buying of the Hebrew slave. By the time of Nehemiah, when they came back, they was like, "Nah, we ain't gonna do that no more." And this is why in the time of Jesus that wasn't practiced no more, because they took advantage of the slavery that was being regulated in the Bible was supposed to kind of, in a sense, benefit the person that's in debt. Because if you think about it, let's say like this existed in this country right now, right? That means that I could make my 30-year mortgage a 7-year mortgage as an American citizen, as a Hebrew citizen, right? That's not desirable for the person that owns your debt, which is the bank. You know what I'm saying? Now, basically, you're telling me within 6 years, all I have to do is just, work for you. Yeah, I give up my rights, certain rights. I can't just leave the country. I got to stay on your property or do whatever you want me to do for your land. But I'm able to basically pay off my debt. And you have to, like, this is not something that God would encourage, because he wanted the Israelites to be the lender, not the borrower. You know what I'm saying? But unfortunately, people do get into debt. So this slavery that was, you see, being regulated in the Old Testament is the voluntarily slavery that a man will put himself into to pay off his debt. Now, in the sense of the foreigner now, yes, too, those slaves were supposed to be in the same position, because this type of slavery wasn't only just unique among the Israelites. It was practiced all over. People will basically say, I'll, serve myself to you, and, to pay off a certain debt. But it was 7 years. I didn't think they had the 7 year release plan that Israel had. But that was
They
supposed that,
didn't,
as a,
unless they became the Israelite, I think. But they didn't.
yeah,
If they didn't become Israelites, they didn't have that
yeah,
thing.
but that's the thing too. Like now, and then when it comes to, like, all right, what about the kids who were, the person? If I'm a foreigner and I put myself in slavery and I have kids, in a sense, you're telling the Hebrew now that you got to take their kids too. You cannot break that family apart, because maybe I would just want to just have the man for his labor. I don't want to, extra mouth to feed. But you're telling me if I take a foreign slave now, I got to basically take their family too. So I don't think this was something that you would see practiced heavily amongst the Israelites. You know what I'm saying? This was just something that was provided to provide debt relief. It was kind of like their system of bankruptcy. And number two, you got to also realize too, a lot of the Israelites never had a penitentiary system like we have. You know what I'm saying? Like people didn't get locked up. The beef, the part that we cannot downplay or make pretty of the Old Testament. And this is where the issue of the Old Testament comes now. It's not so much the regulation of people groups or this and that or women and men. It's the treatment of sin. Look at how they tell you how to treat an adulterer. None of us would be here if we was in that culture. So yes, the treatment of sin in the Old Testament is very brutal. I would admit that. But when it comes to, like, the slavery that we envision as as people in this country and stuff like that, if you go by law, that type of slavery would not have been allowed. And I could also now show you now in the New Testament, we may think that the New Testament, makes people want to be slaves. But I find out the problem is with that verse that people stop reading. And
What
I don't know
verse
if
you
you want
talking
me.
about in the new? We can go to the new now. I was for those who are watching, y'all check out Leviticus 25, 45, and 46. I'm just gonna say something about it. This shows that Hebrews could treat slaves as property and will their kids to their kids. So if I'm a slave owner and I'm a Hebrew and I get these non-Hebrew slaves and they have kids, I can will their kids to my kids when I die, and so forth. They weren't gonna get out of that. Now that's a little bit. We can come back to that, but let's go to this New Testament, because I want to talk about Onesimus tonight. I really want to ask our people some questions about it. But what text do you want out of the New Testament? Which
So
one?
one, it says servant, obey your masters. That one. That's to me is the
Ephesians.
most famous
Okay.
one used to, like.
Ephesians. Yeah, I did bring that up. And
And
yeah,
and
that'll be
one
a
thing
good
I
one
want to,
for us to
like,
discuss.
when you think about when you say the Hebrew slavery system, whatever, what we picture is that we're picturing Hebrews going to, like, a town and having seen people hanged on, like, ropes and stuff, and so I'm gonna buy him. It was not like that. It was basically a person that was already a slave to, or a servant slave to, a person they paying off their debt, and this guy decides to sell, this servant to the Hebrew. But it wasn't like they were lined up on a chopping block naked and stuff. It wasn't, was not that, because, like I said, it will contradict the other laws that tells you cannot oppress the poor or mistreat the foreigner.
I just
Like, you have to
thought
put
of a
those
question.
things there too.
I'm going to ask you a question, because I haven't studied this. It just popped into my head. Let's say in that scenario, I'm a slave
Mm-hmm.
of another nation or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm working for this guy, but he's, I still owe you. Even if I sold myself into the slave, I still owe him whatever, a couple years service, right?
Yeah.
But then the Hebrew, you come along and say, how much for him? Oh, well, he's gonna be 30 shekels. And you're like, okay, bet 30 shekels. Now I'm not a Hebrew. What just happened to my freedom? Because you bought me. I don't have the rights of a Hebrew, and I have no intentions on converting to your God. I'm now enslaved, from what I can tell, for life, and so are my kids.
So what do you got to do in that situation?
Yeah, well, I'm
Run.
just asking what it.
Run.
We
Yo,
gonna get to Onisa.
no,
I'm glad you said that. We
It
gonna
says
get to
if you
Onisa.
catch a runaway slave, you cannot return him to the master.
Yeah,
So
but
if
I'm
you
not a
run
runaway. I'm not a runaway.
No.
Yeah,
Meaning that you run
yeah.
away
You say,
after you get
oh,
bought.
okay.
You run. You know what I'm saying? Say like, Pastor G bought you, right? And we all Hebrews and stuff. And you run away from his place, and I see you in my yard. I cannot basically say, well, I gotta return you. You know what I'm saying? I either basically just let you go, or I gotta basically give you provenance too, according to the law, line upon line, precept upon precept.
You said run.
So I'm trying to tell you,
we're gonna get to that. That's good.
Owning slaves was not something you really wanted to do. It was something that you did to provide mercy for someone. That was the real purpose of it. Because
Okay,
there were
I ain't
like
gonna
provisions.
interrupt you. I'm
Yeah.
going to I got your the Ephesians up.
Yeah.
Just wanted to put that out there.
All right, so here we go. We got servants. I know they are NIV would say slaves. Be obedient to them that are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling, and singleness of your heart as unto Christ. Not with eye service as men pleasers, but as servants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, with goodwill doing service as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that whatsoever good thing any man do it, the same shall he receive of the Lord, whether he be bond or free. Now, if I would stop right there now, which most people do, and I was a wicked slave master like the white people were, I will cut verse 9 out. And this is what happened too. They created a Bible called the Slave Bible that basically took out all the verses that give slaves equality. There was no Exodus, because if there was an Exodus, the people say, you know what, they might identify themselves with that people group. We don't want that. But here is where the New Testament cancels slavery. Verse 9. The first line, and masters do the same things unto them. So think about that. You're telling the master to do the same thing. So let's go back up now. If we gotta do this, if the master gotta do the same things, let's go back up to verse 4. Now we gotta say, masters, be obedient unto them that are your servants, according to the flesh, with fear and trembling and singleness of heart. Not with eye service and men please, but as servants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart. Because we gotta remember too, what did the Bible say about Christ? Though being in the form of man, did not take on that. Though being in the form of God, did not take upon that form, but took on the form of a servant. So what Paul is telling this slave master that's becoming a believer is that you got to do the same thing that was commanded to the servants. You got to do the same thing unto them. Plus another thing you got to do. That was that verse 9. Just scroll down a little real quick.
Okay.
Also, you got to forbear threatening, knowing that your master is also in heaven, neither dare respect the person with him. So not only that I have to do the same thing that the slave is commanded to do to me, I can't threaten them. Let me tell you how, as when I wasn't a Christian, right? I was in my job. I was a supervisor of a group of union people, right? I remember when I first got this position, I wasn't a Christian. I was very prideful. I'm like, man, I'm the man now. You know what I'm saying? I'm a boss now. You know what I'm saying? I got people that work for me. And my mentality was that basically I'm the boss, my way go, right? It wasn't until I became a Christian, I became a weak boss. I became too compassionate. I was basically seeing their point of view. Like there were things that I could have fired people for because they messed up, because of the mercy I had as a Christian. Now, if I wasn't a Christian, I could have been in my boss mode and be like, nah, I'm the boss. So I find out how the spirit of Christianity, the true spirit of Christianity, it cancels slavery.
The true spirit of Christianity cancels
Cancels
slavery.
slavery. Now, those slave owners, now, number one, they first of all, they weren't Hebrews, right? So they couldn't even use the Old Testament. But say like if they were using the Old Testament, you were not supposed to buy African slaves because they were stolen. So that whole thing right there, just the Old Testament alone cancels the slave trade. Number two, you got slaves now. Let's say like, whatever, you messed up, your ancestors messed up, but you out here in this country, you still have slaves, right? I read Ephesians and it's telling me that, hold on, I gotta, in a sense, make the slave my equal. People don't know that like it was Christians who got a conscience that basically allowed the Civil War to happen. The Quakers wrote a letter to Abraham Lincoln and that messed up his head. So basically, the true spirit of Christianity had white people fighting white people for black people's freedom.
Let me know when I'm gonna chime in. I think I can
Yeah, I'm good
provide
for now.
something.
I'm good
And
for
I
now.
wanted to say to those actually that may tune out, I know for some people this is really hard to hear. At least your perspective is very hard for them to hear. They can't go there. And y'all can put your comments in the chat because the last 30 minutes, maybe put some questions in there for Richie. What I want to do is this: is when we're talking about this Christian perspective. I'm gonna go to the book of Philemon, but before I go there, if y'all are familiar, Richie, I want to ask you, how do I pose this question? Philemon was the slave master. Philemon was a Christian. Onesimus ran away. Okay, he ran away. And I'm gonna give you some more with that. So this is at a time when they were under the Roman government, Roman rule, Roman government, right? So I looked up some sources, and there was some very, very severe penalties for runaway slaves in that area in that day and time. I'm just trying to understand, if there's a Christian slave owner, why would Onesimus run away? Now, you ain't going to have that in the scripture, but why run away if being a slave is so great under the Christian dispensation or whatever era, age, whatever you want to call it? He
I mean,
ran away.
I wouldn't say it's great. What I would say is that the institution that existed, if you become a Christian slave, if I'm a slave master and I become a Christian, I have to change my perspective in the sense that now I have to make my slave be equal to me. So in a sense too, if my slave said, I want to go now, I have to allow it.
But you
And
do,
like I
and
said,
you do. Go ahead.
it
Go ahead.
depends
I'm
too.
sorry.
Like, if there was a contractual agreement in law where basically this person bonded himself to this person on paper for some debt kind of payment, it's kind of like saying, is the Bible really telling people to like forgive their credit card debts and all those things? Like, so there is a line when it comes to the things that we give to God and the things that we give to Caesar. Um, I think with Christianity doesn't prevent people from fighting for freedoms. But the way we go about it is not by the sword. And this is why a lot of the letters and even the gospels were written to rulers. Like in Luke, it was written to a ruler. Because the purpose was that you want to convince the rulers, you want to get to their heart. So basically they could have that, the spirit of Christ through them. So that was the kind of like the tactic. The tactic of Christianity was to win the hearts of people, not by the sword. So if you look at how black people, we got our freedom in this country, it was a long process. But the blacks, one thing we cannot deny that all of our ancestors, well, the ancestors in this country at least, what I'm saying, were for the most part majority Christian, right? And for some reason, like they never had
When
a
you
problem.
say, I'm sorry, when you say that, when you say our ancestors were no doubt majority
Yeah,
Christian,
in the country, in this country, not in Africa. Talking about when they came to this country and he adopted the faith.
yeah, okay,
But
they what? I think it was forced upon them. I don't think it just go back to what we talked about in the Old Testament. You talked
mhm,
about if they became Hebrews. So why
yeah,
wouldn't I, as a slave over here, now since we're fast forwarding to the 17th, 18th century,
hmm
if I'm in bondage getting a whip put on me,
hmm
why wouldn't I become a Christian?
you think that's what happened? They forced them to become Christian, or they forced them to behave so they could do manual labor? Because if you think about it, why? How can you force them to be a Christian if number one, you're not giving them the whole Bible, you're giving them an edited, redacted version of the Bible.
They
Number
don't know
two,
that. The slave
they're
doesn't
not
know that though.
they're not allowed to worship by themselves. They have to worship according when the white man is there. You know what I'm saying? If they got caught doing their own church services, they were murked. You know what I'm saying? It was actually the Christians, like the Quakers, who were giving the slaves, the true word of God, and was convincing the white people to freedom. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, when Christ says, he who lives by the sword dies by the sword, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Why were they convincing them to freedom? Like why if it's allowed, because it's allowed even under the New Testament, why were the Quakers encouraging the other white people to free slaves?
because it
Where are
was
they
wrong.
getting that? Where are they getting that from?
Yeah, it was from the New Testament. There's a letter that they wrote
The
to
New
Abraham
Testament
Lincoln.
doesn't forbid it. The New Testament doesn't forbid slavery. And if I
But
were to go to Philemon right now, you will see where Paul actually converts. Okay, let me build this.
mhm,
For those who are not familiar with Philemon, Philemon is a slave master. Paul wrote him a letter about this guy named Onesimus, who was a runaway slave.
mhm,
Onesimus runs away from Philemon. He finds Paul. Paul is in prison. And Paul ends up converting this guy, to Christianity and sending him back to Philemon with this letter that we're supposedly reading now. Now this is the way I see that now. This slave ran away. He got his mind right. He got himself together. I'm gonna run away. Keep in mind the context of him being under Roman government. This slave knows the penalty. If he gets caught, it's gonna be bad. It could mean death. But he
mhm,
does it anyway. So he's probably not being treated that well by this Christian master. That is
mhm,
speculation, but I'm just
yeah.
saying he runs away. So he meets Paul. Paul converts him. Now think about this, y'all. What would get a runaway slave to say, hey, I ought to go back to the situation I ran away from? To me, Richie,
Mhm,
Christianity can mess your brain up just that much to that you will run back into the situation. Now, yeah, Paul writes his nice, pretty letter, receive him as a brother. Onesimus is like my own son and everything.
mhm,
So, and you got to be nice because I know you'll be nice. You're a nice guy, blah, 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 blah. I'm just saying the New Testament, number one, does not forbid slavery.
mhm,
It actually encourages you to stay in the state that you're in. Paul encourages Onesimus to go back into the slavery situation that he was in. So my
mhm.
question, when you get all of that from the New Testament and it doesn't condemn, I'm asking you, why would these 17th, 18th century Quakers who were Christians, why would they say, hey, we need to put an end to, was it all slavery or was it just the kind of slavery they were witnessing?
Yeah, I think all slavery, I guess. Yeah, I mean, the slavery that we was talking about, the Old Testament, that wasn't. I mean, that kind of still exists today in a sense. It's called bankruptcy, but um, no, it'll be it's all slavery. The slavery that where a man is stolen, poor people are stolen, which was what happened. For the most part, most of the time these tribes will steal the poorest of the poor from the land and sell them off after whether it was raiding or wars, whatever like that. But all that stuff wasn't condoned in the Old Testament, number one. But the issue here is not the fact. Here's the fact: the people who enslaved us were labeled Christians. know what I'm saying? They carry the Bible with them. They carry their names or Christianized names and stuff like that. So it's kind of like it's hard to separate, the people who were supposed to represent, this loving God and stuff like that. That's not what they did, right? You gotta realize too, there is a devil. You know what I'm saying? The devil been around. If you don't believe he exists or not, I believe that the devil exists. So that means that he knows more about man than we know about. To me, it will make perfect sense to corrupt the truth in order to prevent people from coming to it. So if you look at the teachings of Christ and you compare them to the slave master, there's a big contradiction. They don't match. So I would say, like, when I read the New Testament and the Old Testament, I do not see the desire, or it gives anybody the desire to enslave someone. I don't see none of that in there.
You say
Where
you don't see it giving them the desire. I'm
yeah,
sorry, I was distracted.
Yeah, I don't see how someone could read the four gospels, right? And come from reading that and be like, you know what? I want to still slave people. You know what I'm saying? It's like Jesus is telling me, like, if someone hits me on my cheek, turn the other cheek, or if someone takes my cloak, give him my sweater too as well. And say like I'm a slaver reading this stuff. That's gonna turn me off because in a sense you're trying to weaken me as a slaver by making, people equal to me. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
That's the conclusion I get from the Gospels.
Okay. I want to go back to this point because I don't know if everybody's understanding, or maybe are you getting what I'm trying to flush out here when I say you have these Quakers, you have these Christians, okay, centuries after, they're looking at slavery, and you said all slavery, and they recognize, okay, it's wrong.
Like what
But
happened?
then we have Paul encouraging Onesimus to go back into slavery. Now he's writing a very nice letter to the master, the slave master, receive him as a brother, blah 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 blah. Now that's the first thing. So it does not condemn. Paul obviously is not condemned because he's sending this new convert back into slavery. And when you say from a book that was recommended to me by someone that's helping me with my channel, I want to read this passage because I keep asking, is slavery more reprehensible? And I believe you think so, and I believe many others on this thread would say yes, it is. But I'm interested, by what standard are you judging that slavery is morally reprehensible when it's regulated in the Bible? Because that would mean you have God regulating something that's morally reprehensible, instead of just saying, hey, I'm God, don't do that. Now, let me read to you what I have here in this book. And when we think about it, it says, in fact, I argue that secular ethics, rooted in logical evaluation of moral issues, is the only objective basis for judgment, and that it is far superior than a literal biblical worldview. Now, this is where he's going with to y'all. My secular ethical position and worldview says implicitly that rape and slavery are reprehensible and unethical. Furthermore, my worldview can back up that assertion from strictly objective, logical stance. And most importantly, any Christian, pay attention to this part, any Christian wishes to justify a moral judgment of these acts must actually acquiesce to a secular ethical reasoning to do so. Any literalist who makes moral judgment against these things has no biblical justification for the judgment, and so they too are employing secular ethics. a hypocrite. Now, why did I agree with the author? And let me tell you why. And I believe you think slavery is morally reprehensible, just I think you think that, but when you
Yeah,
look
of
at the
course.
Bible, it agrees that it and regulates it. But you cannot say that it's reprehensible when you have your God regulating something that's morally reprehensible. And if you're saying that it definitely is morally reprehensible, then you're not getting that from the Bible because he clearly regulated it. So God never said in the New Testament or Old Testament slavery is morally that is you just being a good guy and recognizing right and wrong in a logical sense. Now that's why I agree with y'all. If I hope y'all understand.
Yeah, you was breaking up a little bit. I thought it was just my connection, but I see someone in the comments said it
I
too.
think it's I
I
think
get no. I heard what you were saying. I heard everything you were saying.
I'm gonna go out and come back in. I think it'll still broadcast you because I hooked in my I had my computer on Wi-Fi, even though I had it hardwired. So, but go ahead, Richie. Keep talking.
Yeah. Well, for me, I would say that the slavery that I am pissed off about, God does not condone and God does not regulate, because He did say that if any man who kidnaps a man, whether to sell him or to keep him for himself, he shall be put to death. When I look at that, and that's just the Old Testament alone, this is not even looking at the New Testament revelation of God. So when I see that the Old Testament God is against the slavery that put my ancestors in slavery, I don't see the evil God that we're all seeing as an unbeliever. I really don't want to take up the whole show, but I'll answer some of these comments in here then. Let me see. Joe Smith.
All right. Did I mess you up?
No.
Did it cut out? All right. I think
Yeah.
I got a connection now. Okay. I'm sorry. I was just trying to fix it. We'll go pick up where you were.
Yeah, no, I was basically telling the audience that, like, the slavery that pisses me off, which is the slavery, that our ancestors were put in. When I see that the God in the Old Testament revelation does not regulate or condone that kind of slavery, it does give me comfort that even from the Old Testament perspective, that slavery could not exist. The stealing of men, stealing of poor people, that slavery was not condoned or agreed upon by God. It was actually condemned by God. So
Wait, what's slavery? You're making the distinction in the type of slavery. Can you do it one more
yeah,
time?
the slavery that affected us, basically.
Okay, so
Our
the
ancestors,
transatlantic. I agree. I mean,
yeah.
definitely morally, but I don't even. I'm not even going there. I'm just generally asking about owning a human being and the things we see in Exodus 21. Like going back to when you said if the person isn't injured. Well, that's just not what that says. It says if they recover in a day or two. Well, if you're not injured, you don't need to recover.
It says
So you're
recover.
it
So
there.
that was
Yeah. Over in Exodus, here I'll try
21.
to. You want me to put
I'm gonna
up
go
the
with it.
KJV because I had the NIV up. Did you
You
want
can
me
put the
to?
NIV up. Put the
Okay,
NIV up.
so let me share it again so you can see that. There it is. Okay, it should be up. Should be up. So it says started at verse 20, it says, anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result. I agree, as bad as this is, I agree that law is better than what existed 200 or 300 years ago here on this landmass that me and you are on. But that ain't my argument tonight. My argument tonight is that this is bad enough, what I'm reading here in Exodus. And then in verse 21 it says, but they are not to be punished, talking about the slave master, if the slave recovers after a day or two. What's the reason for this? Since the slave is their property. And that's that. These two verses alone, just this, and this is not for the Hebrews. I don't think this is. When I go back and look at the context, this isn't for the Hebrew slave. This is period.
Mhm.
Even if it was for the Hebrew, it would still be bad. You see what I'm saying? That person is injured. They just didn't get their teeth knocked out, or they didn't get an eye put out. But they can be injured, because what kind of beating do you have to inflict on a person in order for it to take them 2 days to recover? I mean, that's pretty.
I find that NIV translation, recover, that word, like that implies that he's injured, but he's recovering. But the word there is basically saying that if he is steady in a day or two. So, like, that's why when you said recover, it was messing my mind, because I didn't, I looked at the KJV, I looked at NSAB,
Okay,
and they
I pulled
say
up
like,
the KJV. I pulled up KJV. I mean, we could do the word study if you want, but in the
look at the
KJV
NSAB,
it says.
and NASB is pretty good too.
Let me see if I can pull that up.
The NIV, that's a whole nother topic, but they do got some verses that kind of like, even in the New Testament, that say other things. But so if you're gonna do something critical, I'll probably use something that's more word for word.
Okay, let's look at this. What I'm pointing out to you is, can we agree? Let's take it step by step. Verse 20, this person, this slave, no matter how we slice it, we're talking about a situation where they get hit with a rod. This is aggravated assault in today's. If you do this today, I mean, you go into jail. It's aggravated assault. It means you beat somebody with a weapon. Okay, and this says the slave, if a man strikes his male, or, and I'm reading the NASB 1995 version. If a man strikes his male or female slave with a rod and he dies at his hand, he shall be punished. If, however, so it's referring back to the situation where they are beaten with a rod, he survives a day or two, no vengeance shall be taken, for he is his property. Now, to me, that's still saying it took this person 24 hours to 48 hours to recover from whatever was inflicted upon them with the rod by their master. This right here, before I even get to transatlantic slave, this right here is enough. This is bad.
So basically, from this verse, it implies that this is what I think you're getting from it. It implies that the Hebrew slave master is allowed to beat their servants as long as he don't beat them that bad. I don't think that's what the verse is saying, because if you look at the whole context of all the verses here, it's talking about when people are getting into beef. Like if you look at the next verse, verse 22, if a man struggle with each other and he strike a woman. So what I think is saying here, I think what happened with this right here is that when Moses was judging the law, this was an incident that happened where a servant must have got hurt, and this was something that was written into their law. But I don't think God is saying that, okay, I allow you to beat your slave.
Okay, let's tease this out. I'm gonna back up a few verses. Let's get some. You know what? If you don't mind,
see personal injuries. It says it right there.
No. If you don't mind, let's do context. Let's get this whole thing, because it's only 21 verses. I don't think those that are rocking with us will mind. And then it's 8:14. What I plan to do for those of you who are out there watching this and rocking with us at 8:30, we want y'all to have, if you have any questions for myself or for Richie, let's bang those out. But right now, let's just get the context. I'll start reading if that's all right with you, bro. Okay. Ordinance for the people. Now, these are the ordinances which you are to set before them. That's God to Moses. He says, if you buy a Hebrew slave, all right, just recognize we're talking about Hebrews of Moses's people. If you buy one of them, he shall serve for 6 years, but on the 7th he shall go out as a free man without payment. Verse 3. If he comes alone, talking about that same Hebrew, because that's the context, if he comes alone, he shall go out alone. If he is the husband of a wife, then his wife shall go with him. So that means I got a Hebrew slave. He was already married.
Mhm.
And when that year of Jubilee or whenever he's redeemed or whatever, him and the wife get to leave.
Yeah,
Now,
because
verse
because
4.
he never owned her. He
Uh,
didn't own the person's wife. He's basically the person that's going
right. Oh,
into
yeah.
yeah
She didn't
yeah
belong to him. She belonged
yeah.
to
Mm-hmm.
the husband. Yeah. Okay, I got you. Okay. So verse 4. If his master gives him a wife,
Mm-hmm.
and she and by the way, y'all, I haven't even gotten into how they treated women, but we're gonna just
Mm-hmm.
press on. If his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall belong to her master, and he shall go out. So the guy that was given a wife, you
Mm-hmm.
can go if you want, but
Mm-hmm.
them kids and that wife I gave you, they
Mm-hmm.
gotta stay here.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I think so in that verse because the wife that he gave her was probably already owned by him.
Yeah,
So
I mean I agree she was on.
yeah,
I don't think
probably
she
owned.
should be on, but yeah, that's the
But
context.
but does she still get the 7 year freedom? Of course she does because
No,
she's a Hebrew. Yeah. Why would
the
you say she doesn't get that?
um I had a verse, and I think if I'm correct, the women do not get to go out just like the men go out. They don't.
Really?
Even the Hebrew. Let me you all right. What I since we going to 8:30, don't let me forget that because I want to
Yeah.
get through this context. But the Hebrew woman,
Hmm.
if I read that right, they don't get to go out unless they were married to that guy that sold
Hmm.
himself into slavery.
Hmm.
No, they
But
don't get that.
from this context alone, we don't get that. We get that basically, this man owned the woman already. So basically, so like she maybe have more time left in their years, all because the man gets to go free, she doesn't get to go free. But according to this, she should get the 7 years though, unless there's
Well,
you should be a
well,
provision that shows that she can't.
I'm gonna
But
try to find the text, but the
yeah,
reason why, just with our general knowledge, think about it. A woman going out free, what is she gonna do without a man in that society where women are nothing, bro? Like they need a man back then, or it meant certain death.
yeah, me. But the master still has to take care of her though. Like he still has to provide for her and the kids. Like they weren't just living in a cave, being treated unfairly. And you also remember too, like
No, no, we're
women.
talking about if she goes out. Now, if she stays with the master,
Oh, okay,
she's
I see what you're
good.
saying. Yeah, yeah.
You said if she gets to go out at the year of Jubilee, and
But
I'm
notice
saying
too,
no.
it doesn't say that the woman stopped becoming the man's wife that's set free. It's saying that she can't go out with the man that married her, right? So
Okay,
that means that when she does go out, her husband is there. And I don't think also that it prevents the man to come to visit her. Like you can't come visit your wife.
that's
It's just
the speculation though. I'm just going off of what it say, bro.
yeah,
I'm just
because
going off of what it say.
these are laws that we have to apply to real situations. Because these are not like saying, okay, this is the law, boom, you can't go out, you have to stay with me. It doesn't say that. You know what I'm saying? It says that you
It,
can't go out with the man's freedom is up. You know what I'm saying? So I would say like if there's a situation now, okay, boom, he's free now. Does that mean I prevent him from seeing his wife or I prevent him from seeing his kids? I don't, I don't see
yeah,
that prohibition in there.
I don't think you see that because you're a good guy, Richie. But let's finish. Let's get down to 21. Let's get down to 21. Exodus 21, and I'm at verse 5. It says, "But if the slave plainly says," and it's talking about that guy, "I love my
Mhm.
master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out as a free man." Then it's talking about the
Mhm.
Hebrew. Then his
Yeah.
master shall bring him to God, Then he shall bring him to the door of the doorpost, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him permanently. And that's where the Hebrew slave. If a man said, now watch this. If a man sells his daughter as a female slave, she is not to go free as the male slaves do. Now, before I go to 8, what are you thinking about right there? We were just talking about this.
So that's interesting how they put the word free for that word right there. I find that interesting. It says go out. It says in KJV, it says go out.
Go out means the same thing it meant for the man earlier. When they go out, that means go out means to go free. But we can look at it.
But there's two different words for free and out. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I'm looking at the KJV now. It says go. What verse is that?
Literally, see right here. I've tried to highlight the note.
Verse 7. Okay.
It means they just did it different in that Bible version. But go free, go out, all of that means the same thing. But let's get verse 8.
Yeah, that's controversial.
Well,
yeah,
we'll come back to it. Come back to it. Verse 8. If she is displeasing in the eyes of her master, who designated her for himself, then he shall let her be redeemed. Does not have authority to sell her to a foreign people because of his unfairness to her. So he can't sell her to a foreign nation, but she can be given to another Hebrew. Because again, women have nothing and they can't own property. They can't do nothing without a man. So a woman would probably rather stay a slave in that situation. But I'm gonna keep going. If he designates her for his son, meaning, okay, so he got her, he hasn't messed around with her, but I'm gonna get this woman for my boy. He shall deal with her according to the custom of daughters. Now that sounds beneficial, but remember, women are still property, even your daughters, because there's passages that talk about men selling their daughters in order to pay off it. But I'll digress on that. If he takes to himself another woman, he may not reduce her food, clothing, or her conjugal rights. Verse 11. If he will not do these 3 things for her, then she shall go out for nothing without payment of money. Now, her going out, remember what that means in that context.
No,
verse
that was
12.
Verse 12, okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to get to 21 so we can sum it all up. He who strikes now it's just talking about a man. This is in general. This is for the slave. If you strike the slave, any human, it says here, he who strikes a man so that he dies surely shall be put to death. Now, that's no different than the whole thou shalt not kill. And if you kill somebody, you go, okay, we can see that. Verse 13. But if he did not lie in wait for him, but God let him fall into his hand, then I will appoint you a place which to flee. I don't know, maybe you killed somebody on accident, the family members are upset, so you need a place of refuge to get away from Pookie and Ray Ray for their money. You see what I'm saying? All right, verse 14. If, however, a man acts presumptuously toward his neighbor so as to kill him craftily, you are to take him even from my altar that he may die. Okay, I get that. He now is going into father, mother, and all his relationship. It covers what my point here, Richie, is it covers things in general, and at each point is telling you specifically who is talking about. I'm gonna keep reading, but all of this isn't talking about a person in the same situation. If we read it like I'm reading it now, you can see it applies to the Hebrew person. Then you got the woman, and then you got men in general. So verse 16. A man, he sells him or he in his possession shall surely be put to death. That's what I think you were talking about earlier. Okay. He who curses his father or his mother surely be put to death. Now, this too is very interesting because I asked the question in one of my
hard stuff. It's some hard
yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
I asked the question about, you know, corporal punishment for our kids here in this country because I mean, we just got to deal with it. A lot of us, that's a cultural thing, you know. I know I got a lot of whoopings growing up, so it is what it is. But I mean, I'm all right.
But back if we live in this culture, we could have been murked.
I'd be dead. I'd be dead.
Yeah, we both be dead. We wouldn't
not,
be here
not
talking.
To me, that's extreme. Because yes, it's bad for your kids. Let's say this cursing has to do with just cussing. It probably has to do with something else. But let's just say it has to do with that. Yeah, if my kids would have done that to me, they know better. But if they would have done that, there would have been consequences. However, death, no. I'm not gonna.
Then I ask you something now. Do you think as a, like, you know, if we was living in this culture back then, right? Do you think that, you know, this law exists? Do you think you have to follow that law? Like, do you think you have to take your children out there and put them to death? Like, it's not something that's like, you know, it's saying that you must do these things, but it does give the law the ability to kill your kids if they disrespect you.
I think you gotta follow the law. I'm not minding the text right now. 21. Back to that. And one strikes another with a stone or his fist, and if he gets up and walks around outside on his staff, then he who struck him shall go unpunished. This is just a fight. It says if men have a court. This is just a fight. So somebody got into a fight, somebody got hurt, but they and then he who struck him shall go unpunished. He paid for his loss of time. He got hurt. I owe him. If I was the one that beat him up, I owe him whatever he would have made on the job. I'll take care of him. Now, verse 20, here we go. If a man strikes his male or female slave, general law, where this is the slave part, starting at verse. If a man strikes his male or female slave with a rod, and he dies at his hand, he shall be punished. If he survives, talking about that however, he survives. Let's just highlight what survives there too. My computer is really.
Let me stop the cam.
And I got like 15 tabs open. That's probably my problem. It all verse 21 with slaves. That 20 and 21 are dealing with slaves.
Yeah, it's really nah.
I started, which is the great. I forgot. In a while, I wasn't set up in this area, but y'all. I really don't like having this hanging. Cycle back.
Am I breaking up? Can you hear me clear?
Yeah. It's messing up on my end. Give me a second.
Yeah.
Dang. Okay, turn on. Yes, I have to. That's bad. Technical problem. Not much I can do. Let's let you. And come back, y'all. Let me text you, Richie. I'm gonna send you a text. Back.
Hmm. Yeah, he's gonna sign off and come back on.
Still doing it. All right. A new broadcast right quick because we are in. I really apologize about this problem. Well, I'm gonna make a broadcast with you. I'm gonna send you the link, and I'm gonna go ahead and y'all. You'll see it probably immediately. I don't know how it's gonna work out. Even now though. Okay, yeah, I'm just make one.